Dr. Das, can we just check if the audio is okay?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you quite clearly.
Loud and clear, Pitasta.
Okay. And I notice, I see that Rangarajan is there, and so we'll start at 4.
Yeah, 4 minutes later.
Yeah, start at 4. Yeah. Okay. So, Sobhana, you got my message, right? About the program and the time, more or less, when you will be invited to speak.
No, I didn't see that actually. I'll just check.
Yeah, I sent you a message. Okay, let me quickly say, since there are 3-4 minutes, I expect you will be invited to speak at about 4:40 or so.
Okay.
Okay, and well, I have sent you a message writing down
Okay.
the opinions. Okay.
Oh, Shobana is there. The sun is there. I'll mute myself.
The message was on your, I mean, it was a SMS message. Okay.
Okay, I'll just check.
Shall we start?
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
Go ahead, Pitasta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting. I request everyone to please mute your mics and turn off the videos to avoid any technical problem during the meeting. Only the speaker might unmute themselves and turn on the videos while they speak or present their content. Thank you. We have gathered to celebrate the life and work of Professor M S Narasimhan, a world-renowned mathematician of extraordinary breadth and depth, and a multifaceted personality. Professor Narasimhan worked at the School of Mathematics at TIFR for the large part of his career and then moved on to head the mathematics group at ICTP from 1992 to 99. After this, he moved to Bangalore and was in particular associated with the Department of Mathematics, IASC, as an NMI Distinguished Associate. Today's program is a celebration of this remarkable life and times of Professor Narasimhan. We now invite the Director of IASC, Professor Govinda Rangarajan, who will present the opening remarks on Professor Narasimhan. Professor Rangarajan will also be sharing a text message from Professor C.N.R. Rao. Professor Rangarajan, please.
Thank you, Vitasta. Let me again welcome all of you on behalf of the Indian Institute of Science. We have lost a truly outstanding mathematician. So I came to know him much later than probably many of you. I came to know him when I was already chair of the math department, and we wanted him associated with the department. There was this program on mathematics initiative, and he became the first distinguished associate of the mathematics initiative in around early 2005. After that, he has been a regular visitor to the department. I have interacted with him often during that time. I think some of my colleagues tell me that who were students earlier in TFR tell me they were always a bit afraid of him, but I never saw that Narasimha avatar of his. So I only saw him as a sort of gentle grandfatherly figure. The mathematics initiative. It's after that he has been okay. Therefore, as I said, I saw him more as a, I saw only that phase of his life where he was a very grandfatherly, wise old man who could be approached for advice whenever required. And he was, very helpful to the department. I think, his stature brought, again, had a lot of benefits to the math department. So we are very grateful to him, for being associated with the department. And as many have pointed out, he had a very, diverse range of interests. I remember once when going to his house for dinner, he was, of course, he was talking about Tamil literature, but he also gave us some old video movies, Tamil movies, for us to watch. I found, I never would have thought. Somehow it didn't, you would think, Tamil literature is fine, but you would not be watching movies. But, he gave us several CDs of Tamil movies for us to watch. So that showed the breadth of his, taste that he had. He could enjoy many things in life. With these few words, let me, read out the message from Professor C.N.R. Rao. So he says, M S Narasimhan and I have been very good friends for a long time. We used to discuss science policy matters. When he was in Trieste, I took the opportunity of visiting him. Narasimhan easily laughed at things, and when he was at mathematics research, he was all serious. Narasimhan was a great mathematician. He'll be missed very badly. May his soul rest in peace. C.N.R. Rao. So let me turn the mic back to Vitasta.
Thank you, Professor Govinda Rangarajan. We will now be playing a short video for you. It is from an interview of Professor Narasimhan, which was held at the Department of Mathematics, IISc, in the year 2019. A portion of this video was played at a TIFR meeting on June 4th. We are going to show, what we are going to show now is consists of different portions of the interview. Also, the entire interview is on YouTube in 4 parts.
We'll now talk to one of the greatest Indian mathematicians of this period, Professor M S Narasimhan.
I mean, first of all, as you say, I grew up in a small village, and there was an elementary school with just one teacher for 5 classes. But somehow it worked well. I mean, there was no problem. Then when I had to go to secondary school, it was about 5 miles from my place. There were not so many buses and so on and so forth. And the only way we could go to that place and then come back from the town, which is nearby, is to use a bullock cart. And that was a real luck for me to come into contact with Father Racine, which at a formative stage shaped my career. Anyway, Seshadri and I joined the intermediate the same year.
Ah,
But we didn't know each other very well.
Right.
But let me say, this so-called modern algebra
right.
was never taught in India except perhaps in Calcutta. And Racine introduced that subject.
Right.
Now, K. Chandrasekhar and K. G. Ramanathan, they were the interviewing committee.
Right.
Only 2?
Yeah, only 2. And I still remember one of the questions. See, they asked about usual Cauchy's theorem. In Gursa's book, it is stated in such a generality, it's very hard to prove, which you never use in practice.
Right.
So I started Jordan curve or something, and then, luckily for me, they asked what's Jordan curve. I mean, what's a function of bounded variation? So that was analysis.
Right.
So I could answer them, quite well. So luckily, if you had asked me exactly the proof as in Gursa, I mean, that's supposed to be one of Gursa's best contributions. So I would have been lost. So analysis was quite okay. And there's one more thing I want to say, it's more amusing. They asked me, what is the Fourier series of e power I theta?
All right.
So I said cos theta plus I sin theta. And then I was very proud. Because, in school, in universities, we learn only with real coefficients.
Right,
You
right.
never talk of Fourier.
Right, yeah.
And then there's a smile in their face.
Right.
The reason I understood was, nowadays Fourier series is written in terms of e power I theta.
right.
They wanted me to say e
Right,
power
it
I
is.
theta, but examiners purposely led me to give you a wrong answer. You can imagine doing that, right? Of course, I realized afterwards what the answer I gave is not right.
Right.
But then I was also somewhat upset that, sometimes it's something like this. You don't know the answer because
Right.
sometimes there's no answer also.
Right.
And then the examiner asks, do you think this is the answer? Then in that thing you say, you agree with him.
Yeah.
So real interest was in geometry, which of course kindled by the lectures of Schwartz and complex manifold. But then since he also talked about the elliptic equations for Hodge theory, I could get something there and went. So I thought, okay, I don't think very consciously. I said maybe I should move from there because that's not where my real interest was. So that was the reason. And what's the first work I did? Yeah, with Ramanan, I think.
Universal connections.
Universal connections. So that's all used. The Chern-Simons used that theorem in their paper. And also, these people like Chern, he once told me, that's the most important paper, one of the most important papers in, differently, sector and private sector, which are supposed to use mathematics. We need the applied mathematicians to go and talk to them. What is the kind of mathematician they want? If they can tell us in 4 years, I want this kind of trained mathematicians in my institution, we will arrange for it. We will train them. You don't have to even say today that you will definitely offer them jobs. Okay? So they would only. Private sector will not even talk to us. One of the premier institutions which has to use a lot of mathematics, including numeric analysis, it happened in Bangalore. I'll tell you later what this institution is. So we asked, what do you want? We don't want anything. We want some computer programmer or something. We don't need anything more. So, how can you have? And in another institution, they said, the mathematician said, off the record, I don't know why you are here. They never ask us anything. And this reminds me of, I was talking to one factory manager, let's say, somebody like that, big shot. I said, do you have a research wing in your company? He said, of course we have one. And then, as a joke perhaps, he says, but hearing their advice, I will not use it in the shop floor.
Right.
This again, my friend J.L. Lyons, who was a student of Laurent Schwartz, purest of few to start with. Then it's you set up now the big French school of applied mathematics.
Yes.
So he told me, to start with, he had a small organization which consists of some mathematicians, some engineers. The engineers can talk to the mathematicians, understand something. The engineers also can talk to people in the shop floor. So the engineer goes and asks them a question. If he can solve, he solves it. Otherwise, he takes it back to the mathematician. Hopefully, they can solve. This is the kind of setup. And the mathematicians were very good mathematicians. And he told me, for about 10 years, there were no takers. A small institution which was running. Then when the Airbus became very successful, other countries stopped giving it any technical information. So they have to hope that somewhere in their country they can find. And they found this, or maybe Lyons made himself known, or whatever it is. And then now there are about 40 institutions like that. So what you are saying is, even this institution was there without probably any hope or any future. Because it was there, I mean, they could tap that and their experience and then expand it. How things are for the last 15 or 20 years in India. I mean, with the governmental circle, I have no too much contact. Before that, I can tell you, you can say, I want to do something in mathematics, which may not have any applications, but this is my program. Can we have funds? And we used to get funds. Because probably they also knew the people who were asking already something, whatever it is. Now, I don't know, everybody wants something immediately. How can you, I mean, people have to know some, see, when you do interdisciplinary, I used to joke, people should know well some. As you said, there are two kinds of mathematicians, which even not only you and Grothendieck says, one are problem solvers and one are theory builders. He gives an example. Suppose you have a nut and you want to separate the kernel from the whole thing. He says there are two ways of doing it. One is to take a hammer and then hit it and come out. The second is to soak it in some liquid. After some time, you can simply peel off. Okay? So, the first is the problem solvers, and the second is, I mean, problem solvers also need some capacity. While Grothendieck is the second kind. Now, so what is important about Grothendieck in my view, and also I say, how I had to sort of come to terms with Grothendieck in some sense, and use it. So, as you know, she was an amazing mathematician who revolutionized algebraic geometry and gave techniques and as well as ideas in algebraic geometry which helped to solve problems in number theory like Fermat's last theorem and so on. Now, everybody will say he is very abstract. Okay? The point I found was, when I studied him, he never uses too much generality. He uses some of the right kind of generality and abstraction. Okay? And the other thing I found was, this will look like a sort of controversial statement. Grothendieck has made algebraic geometry easier.
We now invite Professor Vijay Raghavan to say a few words.
Thank you very much. This is a very difficult occasion because Professor Narasimhan was, of course, a great mathematician, but he was also a good friend to me and several others, both in our time in Bombay and then in Bangalore. With the passing of Professor Narasimhan, the world of mathematics has lost a great mind, a teacher, and an institution builder. Professor Narasimhan built communication between mathematicians and physicists, and built bridges between contemporary and traditional knowledge systems also in mathematics, as you would have heard at the TIFR memorial from Professor Divakaran. Professor Narasimhan's influence on mathematics and mathematicians is, of course, very well known. And I'm not qualified to comment on this, though his impact was evident even to those outside of mathematics, that he had made great contributions in mathematics. I'd like to comment on a couple of aspects of Narasimhan's capabilities and influence. The first was his role as an administrator. Now, this is not an area where mathematicians, particularly so-called pure mathematicians, are supposed to excel or are usually celebrated for. Narasimhan's administrative capabilities built on the founders of TIFR School of Mathematics and ensured its continued excellence and protected it against the entropy bashing at its doors. There is a fine balance in institutional functioning between the development and maintenance of excellence and the prevention of opinionated and arbitrary views in its quest. And Narasimhan managed to have excellence done without being arbitrary. Most institutions go to the other extreme. They formalize mechanisms so much that the process matters more than the content. And with that, you lose the quality and the kind of subjective decisions you always need to build excellence. Narasimhan didn't make that compromise. And I really feel that in many ways, his role would have been very valuable in the broader TIFR ecosystem. And that, for example, having a pure mathematician like him as the director of TIFR would have put the level of excellence at some point more towards, shift the median, skew the median towards excellence rather than having the mean, rather than regress towards the mean, as often happens when people sit together in committees and take decisions. Narasimhan also embodied two other aspects of leadership. One was at the National Board of Higher Mathematics of the Department of Atomic Energy. That really, along with his successors, has broadened the base of mathematics enormously in the country. And that is something which we also have to learn about how, again, mathematics can be broadened without dumbing it down or making it directly career-oriented, which should be a consequence of the quality and not something which you directly drive for. His other example of institution building was in the International Center for Theoretical Physics in Trieste, where he built the mathematics department well, and others also have followed. Ramdas, I think, was also the head of the ICTP mathematics. But there he worked with several people, including biologists such as me, to help develop schools in developmental neurobiology, for example, so that the broader aspects of science could be available to people in countries of the South. So that was another extraordinary experience. I'd like to end by saying that the osmosis of his qualities was made possible by an institutional structure such as the TIFR canteen, where people of all schools, all departments could come together and talk, not just about their work, but about anything else. Such a place has disappeared as our institutions have grown and become more complex. People sit largely within their own departmental or institutional walls, and therefore the diffusion of this kind of excellence benefiting others, those chances have become more and more limited. So while we must remember him, we must also alter our institutional structure so these kinds of interactions can grow. We lost both Narasimhan and before him, a short while ago, Professor Seshadri. And they too, as you've heard, were taught by Father Asim, and they joined Loyola College together. Imagine in the country how many such Racims there would be and how many Narasimhans and Seshadri there would be. And therefore, I think it's very important that institutions such as IISc and TIFR work together and try to establish a program without compromising excellence to see how early stage mathematics education of the highest quality can be made available at a very wide level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vijay Raghavan, for your comments. The Department of Mathematics, IISc, has reached out to several friends, colleagues, and well-wishers of Professor Narasimhan for this meeting, and we have received many messages. Some have sent text messages while others have contributed videos. These messages provide a glimpse of the many ways in which Professor Narasimhan helped and nurtured everyone whom he met. Taken together, they provide a beautiful insight into the man, his thoughts and actions. We will be reading out some of these messages and playing the videos for you in the course of the program. We now invite Professor Thangavelu to read out the first set of text messages.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us in remembering Professor M S Narasimhan. So first I will start with a message from Professor K Srinivasan from New York University. He was formerly the director of ICTP. So I met Professor M S Narasimhan in 2002 during the visit to Trieste, just before accepting the ICTP director's position in early 2003. I had known him a few years earlier. By the time I actually arrived at ICTP, his formal appointment there had ended. Fortunately for ICTP, fortunately for CTP, Narasimhan had come to head the mathematics section thereafter retiring from TIFR, but he visited both ICTP and CISA regularly for a few years. His mathematics was, of course, highly regarded. As I was to learn soon, he had impeccable judgment of people. I sought his help in two immediate respects. First, the scientists who had been part of the creation of ICTP had passed away, retired, or were soon retiring. So I got the surviving ones together at a meeting and sought advice on how to keep the spirit of ICTP alive or recreate it in more time-appropriate way. Narasimhan was a vital part of that group. Not surprisingly, the group made no concrete suggestions, but a few private discussions with Narasimhan, and the topic showed his thoughtfulness and skill in speaking the truth without sounding negative. Next slide, please. The second instance related to the complex interactions that TIFR mathematicians had with applied mathematicians in India. I asked for his help in supporting the cause of applied mathematics. I particularly suggested that some part of the resources from the National Board for Higher Mathematics, in whose creation under the aegis of Department of Atomic Energy, Narasimhan had played a key role, and whose first chairman he was, could be used for that purpose. It was clear that he was troubled that the subject was not doing as well in India as it deserved, and made formal arrangements that enabled a few applied mathematicians to attend international meetings, etc. We warmed up to each other quickly. I was grateful to have been part of his life for some years. Next slide, please. As part of my ICTP role, I had made various attempts to understand the status in physics and mathematics in developing countries. One of them was the status of mathematics as a discipline in India. My worry was and remains that there weren't enough pure mathematicians in the country whose preoccupation for millennia had been abstract topics. I expressed this and other views in an article in Current Science. Narasimhan readily agreed with everything in the article, but was keen to acquaint me with how mathematics research had been built at TIFR, and he showed me an article by Andhra Vale, who had spent 2 years at Aligarh Muslim University in the 1930s and knew Indian mathematics well, in which he had expressed the view that TIFR had become the leading light of modern mathematics in India. Narasimhan's pioneering role in that effort is too well known to need elaboration here. Next. Our scientific interests were sufficiently different, so I did not learn any mathematics from Narasimhan, but I got to know and appreciate him as well as a person. Eventually, I met his journalist wife, Mrs. Sakuntala Narasimhan, and came to know reasonably well his daughter, Professor Shobana Narasimhan at JNC, a well-known computational condensed matter theorist. I met him a few times in Bangalore after he had settled there and had become a regular presence in IISc's mathematics department. It is clear that he had great impact institutionally at TIFR, ICTP, IISc, and others. We discussed various things in those meetings, but never in the same depth as in my ICTP days. I had moved on, and as had Narasimhan, and our common passion had cooled off a bit. Next slide, please. The final time we met was at a special event of the mathematics journal, Bhavana, that included M S Narasimhan, Rodam Narasimha, and me. Rodam Narasimha was my professor, and we worked in similar fields. Alas, he too passed away recently. I was seated between them on that occasion. When my turn came to speak, I said the following: it may take me 50 years longer before I attain the same level of perfection as Professor Rodam Narasimha, but I can aspire to do the same type of work as Professor M S Narasimhan only in my next life. As a Hindu, I can legitimately aspire for it. The words were not meant to be literal, but they convey both the affection and regard I continue to hold for these extraordinary people. I miss them greatly. My heartfelt condolences to Narasimhan's family, all his mathematics colleagues and friends. Next one, please. Yeah, the next slide, next message is from K Sandeep from TIFR Center for Applicable Mathematics. Here it goes.
Slides are not moving. The slides are not moving.
No, they are moving.
Yeah, they are moving for me also.
Okay, so something wrong with my...
Yeah, this is a message from K Sandeep. Professor M S Narasimhan had a long association with TIFR camp since its beginning in the IISc campus as the IISc TIFR joint program in applications of mathematics. Apart from his administrative role, he also gave a course on partial differential equations at the center, introducing some of the modern concepts. The lecture notes of this course are still available in the center library. He was associated with the center in many administrative capacities till his retirement from TIFR. In 2003, when he was returning from ICTP, the center extended him an invitation, which he accepted very happily and was associated with the center since then as an honorary fellow of TIFR. Next. During his stay at ICTP, he used to visit the center almost every year. And during these visits, he used to give a couple of seminars. In this context, I would like to recall a series of lectures we had in the center during one of his visits in the early 2000s. That was the time the Clay Mathematics Institute announced the Millennium Problems, and the series of lectures arranged was on these problems, probably the first of this type of seminars that happened in the country. Professor Narasimhan took the initiative and gave lectures on 3 of these problems, namely the Poincare conjecture, Riemann hypothesis, and the Hodge conjecture. Years later, when we were conducting a workshop on partial differential equations, we requested him to give a 2 talk on PDEs appearing in his research. He accepted the invitation and gave a beautiful lecture on the topic, which was well received by the audience. Next one. The shifting of our center to its new location did reduce the frequency of his visits to the center. However, he used to attend many of the talks and seminars which were of interest to him. Even in the last 1 year, he visited the center a couple of times to give some online lectures and also to visit the library. This kind of commitment at his age is something rare to see. During this visit, recall him very proudly telling that he's writing an article and using the center affiliation in it. It was always inspiring to meet Professor Narasimhan and listen to him. It is indeed a great loss for the mathematical community. Heartfelt condolences from the TIFR camp community. Next one. Yeah. Next message is from Professor Arvi Ramamurthy. Emerson was a mathematician with major accomplishments in areas such as algebraic geometry and mathematical physics. My own area of mathematical statistics is far removed from his, and in the natural course of events, our paths would not have intersected. Fortunately for me, thanks to my friends in IISc, I did get the opportunity to meet him and get to know him well. In the early 70s, when I was a student at ISI Calcutta, he was a distant but familiar figure. He would come to ISI to attend the council meetings and would visit the 4th floor in ISI, where we of StatMath had our coffee club. The closest that I got to him in those days was helping him light his cigarette a couple of times. Next. Later in 2007 and 2010, I spent extended time in IISc, and that was when I got to spend time with him. Almost every day, there would be a group consisting of MSN, Sitaram, and me bundled in Gadadhar's car, going off to lunch at the faculty club, followed by coffee at Prakriti. Later, I would sometimes stop by his office for a chat. We lived in different mathematical worlds, and so our conversation would center around other topics, typically books and often Tamil books. He was a voracious reader and once said, as long as I can read, I can manage with life. He introduced me to many Tamil writers, starting from Rangaswamy, who wrote under the pen name Ragami. He liked Ragami's description of traditional life, I think, in a biography of Ramanujan. There were other authors that I got to know of. Recently, I told him of a Tamil book, Sancharam, which described the life of poor temple Nadaswaram players. He immediately reminded me of another old book dealing with an Nadaswaram player, a book that I have just managed to get. I was looking forward to reading it and finding out his take on that, but that was not to be. Next. Abstract and abstruse discussions apart, I felt free and comfortable talking to him about the issues that confronted me and of my thoughts of moving to India. He was generous with advice, encouragement, and practical suggestions. With MSN's passing away, there is one less person in my universe to whom I can turn to for advice and counsel. The universe, they say, is expanding, but mine has definitely shrunk. Next one, please. Yeah, next message is from Ramesh Srikantan from the Statistical Institute, Bangalore Center. I have known Narasimhan my entire life, first as my friend's father, then as an inspiring yet slightly intimidating mathematician, and finally, for the last 15 years or so, as a colleague. It was during this period that I got to really know him. I fondly recall the time we spent in the canteen of TAFR Center discussing various things, from mathematics and mathematicians to the latest political fiasco, and of course, cricket. His enthusiasm for mathematics was tremendous. Even when he was well into his 80s, he would come to seminars and lecture courses at ISI. I remember that after he had been attending a course by Najmuddin Fakhruddin at ISI for a few months, he took ill and was in the hospital. Jishnu called him up to see how he was, and he said, yes, he had been in the ICU, but was fine. And using the stuff Najmuddin was talking about, he was able to answer a question that he had been thinking about. He was always encouraging and positive, especially towards younger mathematicians. I will miss him. Next, please. Yeah, next message is from Ladi Sitaram of Indian Statistical Institute. Let me first offer my deepest condolences to Mrs. Narasimhan, Shobana, and Mohan. MSN, as he was universally known, was a mathematician of distinction and repute who established a significant results in diverse fields of mathematics, differential geometry, algebraic geometry, partial differential equations, Riemann surfaces, representation theory, etc. His awards and prizes are too numerous to be listed here. Some of his influential results include gems, just as the Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem, in collaboration with his very distinguished colleague and close friend, C.S. Seshadri, the Kotake-Narasimhan theorem in collaboration with T. Kotake, and the analog of the Borel-Weil-Bott theorem for Hermitian symmetric pairs on the non-compact type, or non-contact type, maybe, I don't know, in collaboration with K. Okamoto. He influenced several generations of mathematicians. Some of his students like S. Ramanan and M S Raghunathan went on to become distinguished mathematicians in their own right. Some of his other students include R. Parthasarathi, T. R. Ramdas, and N. Nitsure, who have obtained international recognition in their respective areas of expertise. Next slide. Yeah, my own contact with him goes back to 1975 when I was a visiting member at TAFR for a year. I had received my PhD only very recently and felt overawed by him, although he was very kind to me and took interest in my work. Later, between 2012 and 2021, after he moved to Bangalore, he became a friend. I considered it a privilege to be admitted to his wide circle of friends. We had a pact. He would call me Sitaram and I would address him as Professor MSN. MSN, Ramamurthy, and Gadadhar. Well, MSN, Ramamurthy, Gadadhar, and I would very often go out for lunch to some pleasant restaurant in the neighborhood of IISc. We had conversations on several topics: political events, cricket, music, Tamil literature. Sometimes Ramamurthy and MSN would discuss nuances in Tamil literature about which Gadadhar and I knew nothing. He was quite well read in all these topics, and I learned a great deal from him during those informal conversations. Above all, he was a fine human being, considerate and kind to everyone, irrespective of the age or status. Gudumbai Seshachalu Narasimhan left us on May 16th and sail away, as Shakespeare might say, to the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. Next one, please. Yeah, this is from Maithili Ramaswamy, formerly from TIFR Center, Bangalore, now with ICTS. It is with awe and admiration that I recollect my meeting with Professor M S Narasimhan in the late 70s during his visits to the then TIFR Center in the IISc campus. The way he calmly conducted the interviews and his incisive questions left a lasting impression on me, of course, tinged with trepidation about my future at TIFR. The second phase of my interaction with him was in mid-80s when he taught us a course on PDE. By then, we had more interesting and wide-ranging conversations about analysis, Gusa's book, and different ways to present some deep theorems of PDEs. Next. Next one, please. The third interaction period was after his return from Trieste, when he settled down in Bangalore. Much to our delight, started visiting camp often and even participated in our seminar and workshop activities. That was the most inspiring period for me to get to talk to him about the developments in PDE and analysis from his perspective. This is when I learned about V.K. Patodi's work and the exciting developments regarding index theorems for linear elliptic operators. Fortunately for me, he passed on to me some of the printed material that he had discussed. These are invaluable treasures for me even today. Next one, please. His 80th birthday celebration meeting held in Bangalore provided another opportunity for me to get a glimpse of his mathematical life and his fine personality. I still recall some of his inspiring advices. The one I apply often is that it is better to start every morning with some calculations to get in mind to focus on deeper things as the day goes on. For many in my generation and even younger ones, he has been an inspiration and will continue to be. His passing away is a big loss to the mathematical community and, of course, to his family and friends. I pray for his soul to rest in peace and offer my heartfelt condolences to his wife, Shakuntala, daughter, Shobana, and his son, Mohan. Next one, please. This is from Valentino Tosati from McGill University. Narasimhan was a very important figure for me when I was just starting to develop my interest in mathematics as a high school student in Trieste, and was very kind to meet with me many times at ICTP to explain what research in geometry is about, which eventually steered me in that direction. What was truly amazing was his breadth of vision and depth of thought. He was an algebraic geometer at heart, but also worked in differential geometry and analysis and made fundamental contributions in all these areas. In an area where specialization is the norm, such figures are very rare. And he often stressed in our conversations the importance of cultivating broad interest in mathematics. Next. Our meetings continued occasionally as I went to college in Pisa. And I think the first mathematics conference that I ever attended was Narasimhan's 70th birthday celebration at ICTP in 2002, which was quite a revelation for me as a second-year college student. After I left for my PhD in the US and he returned to India, we had less chances to meet. But I remember fondly visiting his house in Bangalore in 2007 with all of our family. I miss him very dearly. Next one, please. Yeah, this is from Sumati Surya from Raman Research Institute. Sachin and I will miss Narasimhan sorely. In the last 17 years of knowing him, we have discussed mathematics, politics, and literature, assisted by bottles of wine and good food. It all started when Shobana suggested I talk to her father about a math reference in French that I was seeking. I knew he was a famous mathematician, but she assured me that he would enjoy helping me. In the true TIFR math tradition of assisting needy physicists like me, Narasimhan not only helped me understand the result I needed, but also hand translated large parts of that paper. The interaction meant a lot to me and nucleated our subsequent friendship. Next, please. Over the years, Sachin and I would meet Narasimhan's family regularly for kids-free lunches at restaurants and dinners, often at our place. We discussed aspects of mathematics that puzzled us. Narasimhan's view from the top was something we came to deeply appreciate. We also relished the discussions on politics, which often followed the technical discussions. As a progressive, Narasimhan was simultaneously both sophisticated and down to earth, and his perspective from another generation was very valuable. He had a charming no-nonsense attitude and brooked no artifice, which was extremely refreshing at a time when professional success is measured along the positive reals. Narasimhan held a special place in our lives, and we are deeply thankful to have known him. He will remain forever in our hearts and minds. Next, please. Yeah, maybe before concluding this, I would like to say a few words about my interaction with Narasimhan. As our director has pointed out, Narasimhan was really a Simas Opanam to the students of TIFR Center here, but fortunately I escaped. He was never in my interview committee. The only time I met him was in TIFR Mumbai when I was on my way to US. Later I met him in Princeton. I had the privilege of inviting him for dinner, and then he was not I was not at all frightened because we never discussed mathematics. I think the only time I discussed mathematics with him, or maybe he discussed mathematics and I was listening to him, was sometime when we were going to probably to Madrid to two different conferences. So later in IISc, I had a lot of occasions to talk to him, but we always discussed Tamil literature and nothing more than that. Only this semester, I had a chance to lecture on his theorem, the famous Kothake Narasimhan theorem, as part of my course. Usually the courses will start with easy stuff and then end with difficult theorems, but my course started with the Kothake Narasimhan's theorem, and that was the only difficult theorem in that course. Later, everything turned out to be easy exercises. I will miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tangavelu. We will now be playing some of the video contributions that we have received. The first video is by Kyung Seong Lee.
Hello, I'm Kyung Seong Lee. I'm a mathematician working at IMSA, University of Miami. I would like to thank to the organizer for giving me this chance to speak here. I met Professor Narasimhan in 2015, and I was a fresh postdoc at the time. When I first met him, he and I happened to consider quite related problems, and so we began to discuss derived categories of moduli spaces of vector bundles on curve. And from then I visited Bangalore quite often to learn and work with him. Meeting Professor Narasimhan was a turning point in my life, and he changed my life forever. So he was a great mathematician, of course, but also a great mentor and a great teacher. So I could learn really many things from him, and he always encouraged young mathematicians, including myself, to go further, and gave many valuable advice. So he was also a great person. While working with him, I was always surprised by not only his great mathematics and intuition, but also from his amazing kindness and generosity. So it was my great pleasure to visit his place and spending time with him and his family and his colleagues. So his illness couldn't stop him, couldn't stop his passion to mathematics, and we studied and worked together until quite recently via Skype and email. And now it's my duty to complete and continue the mathematics we discussed and created together. So let me finish my speech by expressing my deepest gratitude and respect to him. Thank you very much, Prof Narasimhan, for everything you have done for me and the mathematical community. Thank you.
The next video is by T. Ramadas.
Narasimhan's going is a great personal loss that I have not yet come to terms with. I will only say now that it was my enormous good fortune to have had him as my teacher. I wish to convey brief messages from Carlos Koenig, President of the International Mathematical Union, and Shigefumi Mori, former IMU President. Carlos wrote of his sadness at the passing of Narasimhan and Seshadri, whom he called two giants of our field. He said, "I knew R. Narasimhan very well, and he would often mention both of them. Please convey my condolences to the friends and families." Shigefumi wrote, "Thank you very much for letting me know that Narasimhan passed away a couple of days ago. Since my advisor, Masayoshi Nagata, was a close friend of Narasimhan and Seshadri, it is a big loss, and I sincerely express my condolences. I had known since my PhD days that they had strongly contributed to mathematics of India, but when I got involved in IMU, I also found out that their contribution to IMU was interwoven with their research activities. I especially admire the Indian algebraic geometers, and I believe that this is the source of strength of mathematics of India."
Next is an audio message by Subodh Shinoy.
My name is Subodh Shinoy, and I am a solid-state physicist. My overlap with Professor M S Narasimhan was as a friend and colleague when we were both at the International Center for Theoretical Physics, Trieste. The younger mathematicians there spoke of him with a kind of awe. I knew he was a great man, but was not exactly sure what he had done. He was older and wiser and was very kind to me, friendly but not casual, and with a touch of elegance. Whenever I came worked up about some real or imagined injustice or inefficiency, he would calm me down and say that in a year I would have forgotten all this. We used to talk, easy listening and random observations, mathematical royalty relaxing with a physics gesture, world politics, the future of India, and the many positive qualities of Italian red wine. I seem to recall a conversation regarding how Italian grape varieties compared to ragas in Indian classical music. A cheerful Merlot was like a pleasing rag Hamsadhani, while the richer Valpolicella Amarone was like a deeper, more gambhir rag Bhairavi. During one of these sessions, I asked him, "Narasimhan, who discovered you?" He understood at once that the question was about more than an individual. He said his village school teacher told him to go to Madras to Loyola College that he had not heard of. There he met the Belgian Jesuit Father Racine, who taught him what mathematics was. Narasimhan later sent me an obituary he had written on Father Racine, and I think it was from Current Science. He said that his surprisingly good school teacher, who took an interest in his development, had played a role in his life. He said it was perhaps all linked to the idealism and sense of purpose that came from the Indian independence movement. I said, so maybe it was like a ladder to help village children climb up from a side pit to a road to the city. He said, maybe yes, but the ladder was pulled up now. Just to end with a suggestion, why not we have a global Narasimhan ladder? A worldwide network of ICTP-linked mathematicians, former diploma, ICTP associates, ICTP-linked institutes in Africa, Latin America, etc., etc. They would keep a lookout for very unusual mathematical talent from Nepal to Nigeria to Nicaragua. An MS Narasimhan studentship given every other year whenever a special talent is found. If young, she could come to Trieste as an add-on to the usual mathematics diploma intake and start her diploma dissertation early. If older, say a PhD student or young faculty from developing world, up to age 25, say, they come to co-teach a diploma course and work with mathematics group faculty. A living academic memorial to a mathematical gentleman who was both elegant and kind. Thank you.
Moving on with the program, we are fortunate to have here with us Shobna Narasimhan, daughter of Professor Narasimhan. I would like to invite Shobna to please share her thoughts.
I would like to share my screen, if that's okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see. Yes.
Okay. So on behalf of our whole family, especially my mother Shakuntala and my brother Mohan, I would like to thank all of you for your condolences and your fond and moving recollections of my father. Many of you also sent us personal messages, and I apologize that I have not yet responded to all of them. I also thank the organizers.
Your slides are not on.
Slide is.
We are not able to see the screen.
Okay, then I'll just stop the sharing then.
No, you couldn't just go to the previous slide. I think it came to the last slide.
I don't know why.
Don't use the slide view mode. Just use the deck view mode, and you'll see it.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll just skip that. Last week, a friend, Ralph Gebauer, told me that some of them were trying to think of a single word that best summarized my father. Ralph chose gentleman. George Thompson chose exceptional. After some hesitation, I chose mathematician because mathematics was his lifelong passion. He lived and breathed mathematics, and it brought him great joy. However, as you have heard from others today, he did have other aspects to his personality. He was exceptionally well-read in English, Tamil, French, and sometimes Italian too. He was greatly interested in music, art, and cricket. He was a fond and loving father to Mohan and me. One of my earliest memories is of my standing on a chair in his office in TIFR, and I was writing numbers on his blackboard. So I wrote 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I stopped and I said, Appa, what number comes before 0? And he got greatly excited. And he later told some of my students, many, many years later, obviously, at that moment, I knew that she would one day become a mathematician. And then he paused and a little bit sadly, he said, or maybe a physicist. We shared interests, passions, stories, and many fun adventures. Even at an advanced age, he was always game for anything. Any crazy idea I had, any adventure I had in mind, he was ready for. Once, when he was visiting me in Cambridge, I suddenly realized he hadn't seen the Rosetta Stone, and then we both just jumped on a train from Cambridge to London, and we made a pilgrimage to the British Museum to see the Rosetta Stone, which he had always been fascinated by, both because of his interest in ancient Egypt and because Andre Weil had invoked it to draw an analogy between number theory, function fields, and Riemann surfaces. Another lifelong ambition of his was satisfied when we went together to Cambodia to see Angkor Wat. So many stories, so many shared adventures. He was also extremely adventurous when it came to food. Together, we went to many restaurants. We tried out lots of different cuisines. He was always willing to explore things. Even in his last illness, he was willing to try out all the new recipes that I would cook and send across to him. And even a couple of weeks before he passed away, I tried out some exotic new dish, and he called me up and he said, I have no idea what it is that you sent me, but I tried it and it was delicious and I relished it. Above all, as you might be able to tell, we were great friends and I miss him terribly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shobna. May I now invite Professor Kaushal Verma to read out the next set of messages?
Yeah, thank you, Tasta. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So I will now be reading out the second set of messages that we have received. So let me begin with a message from Bala Subramanian from IMSC. He writes, I have known Professor M S Narasimhan from 1972 when I joined the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. I had some interaction with him when I was in TIFR. But paradoxically, we became closer only after I left TIFR and joined the Institute of Mathematical Sciences. I joined the Institute of Mathematical Sciences in early 1985. Within a couple of years, some problems arose in the institute between the new entrants and those who were already there. Professor Narasimhan, who was passionate in developing a mathematical culture in Chennai and was very hopeful that the presence of Professor Seshadri in Chennai would achieve this, was greatly disappointed by this development, and I was a party to the numerous discussions between Narasimhan and Seshadri on this issue. I would even believe that the motivation for Professor Seshadri to start the Chennai Mathematical Institute is in no small measure due to these conversations. In 1987, Ramanujan conferences and workshops were held in various parts of India. One such workshop was held in Pondicherry University. Myself and Professor Narasimhan traveled in a taxi from Chennai to Pondicherry, and the 3 hours travel is etched in my mind. The conversation will normally be one way, and it was always a pleasure to listen to his views and comments coming from his vast mathematical and administrative experience. The same is true when I spent a month in ICTP attending a workshop when Professor Narasimhan was there. Also, in one of the Ramanujan Math Society meetings held in the year 2011 at the Harish Chandra Research Institute, when myself, Professor Narasimhan, Divakaran and Raghunathan were all staying in the guest house of the Harish Chandra Research Institute. Even though we discussed all the topics, it would always end up discussing the financial position of CMI, and this was one of his concerns. Not that we agreed on everything. We agreed to disagree when the discussion was on Tamil Nadu politics. As I once told my friends, one attraction for me to accept the invitation for any committee meeting in Bangalore was, in earlier days, a desire to spend some time with Professor Ramchandra and later to spend some time with Professor Narasimhan. I am still not able to get over the feeling that he would not be there when I visit Bangalore. May his soul rest in peace. The next message that we have is from Kalyan Sinha of the Jawaharlal Nehru Center. He writes, My first, though brief, encounter with MSN was in 1972 in the Maths department of IIT Madras. And through the mists of time, I remember fondly his friendliness to me, a much younger colleague. I came to know him better and discussed mathematics as well when he, along with a few of his TIFR colleagues, participated in a conference in ISI Delhi, which I had organized in 1980. This is when I came to know of his abiding interest in the mathematical aspects of quantum mechanics and quantum fields and the role of the representations of the relativistic groups in it. My next major interaction with him began when he, as the chairman of the Maths Committee of BRNS, had me as a member, and this continued through to its new avatar, the NBHM. In the 90s, during his efforts to create an NBHM Institute of Maths in JNU, Delhi, I would often accompany him to the meetings in JNU. However, this did not see the light of the day. After a gap of nearly 15 years, I next met him when I had settled down in Bangalore after superannuation, as had MSN. We were both associated with the Maths department of IISc. I met often for seminars, coffee, and discussions. Aside from maths and mathematical physics, we also shared a great love for good wine, particularly of the red variety, which I guess he acquired during his early days in Paris and I in Geneva. Often the three of us, MSN, Gadadhar, and self, would go for lunch together in a nearby Italian-sounding restaurant, availability of good red wine being a deciding factor. I was privileged to have had a close association with MSN through the years, learning many things along with mathematics, and shall miss him as an inspirational mathematician and as an elder friend. The next message is from Harish Shadri of the Indian Institute of Science. He writes, my first meeting with MSN was in early 2005, a couple of months after I joined IAC. It was largely due to MSN's enthusiasm and drive that we started the first of our seminar series. I recall that it was about multiplier ideal sheaves and Kähler-Einstein metrics. Most of the lectures were by MSN, with Adimurthy, Kaushal, and I contributing a few. I took an immediate liking to his way of understanding and explaining seemingly complicated concepts and theories. He would break down things to their most rudimentary form until things were crystal clear. Frequently, this would be accompanied by remarks along the lines of, in quotes, "This is actually very simple. They make a big deal about it, but here is what it is." Over the years, we had several such seminars, and I have benefited immensely from them. Apart from seminars, there were innumerable discussions about various topics in the intersection of algebraic geometry and differential geometry. He would patiently explain even the most basic concepts in algebraic geometry and look up references or lend me books from his collection. If I had possessed a fraction of his enthusiasm and energy, many of these discussions could have resulted in research projects. During all these years, MSN was unfailingly gracious and generous with me. His immense mathematical stature did not act as a barrier in our interactions. His sense of humor and keen wit undoubtedly contributed to this. In November 2020, he emailed me links to his tribute to Seshadri and a lecture of Donaldson on stability. We exchanged a few emails about that, and that was my last interaction with him. It goes without saying that I shall miss him very much. The next message is from Zhao Tao San of Tanjian University. He writes, I met Professor Narasimhan in 1996 when I was visiting ICTP as a visiting scholar. It was in ICTP that I started to study modelized spaces of vector bundles under the encouragements of Narasimhan. I still remember each time when I tried to read his article, he always said, in quotes, "You don't need to read it. I can explain it for you." In this sense, I am a quasi-student of Narasimhan, in brackets, the words of C.S. Seshadri. After ICTP, I met Narasimhan a few times in Hong Kong, Beijing, and Bangalore. Our talks are, of course, not restricted in mathematics. Professor Narasimhan passed away, we lost a great mathematician, a great teacher, and a dear friend. He will be remembered forever. The next message is from Alberto Warkowski of Mexico. It is with great sadness that I learned that Professor M S Narasimhan passed away on May 15, 2021. I had the fortune of meeting Professor Narasimhan for the first time when he visited the ICTP while I was coordinator of the mathematics section. Later, when he became the head of that section, I was a staff associate and spent many days at ICTP when I had many opportunities to have mathematical discussions with him, during which I learned many things. I think that something that linked us together was that we both regarded mathematics as a unity, where geometry, algebra, analysis are just parts of a greater scheme. We were products, many years later, of the thoughts of Riemann and Poincaré. Professor Narasimhan had the ability to point out the essential aspects of difficult concepts, and he had the willingness to share these ideas with others, often while enjoying the delicious coffee at ICTP bar, an environment that encouraged these long, informal, and productive conversations. I was delighted that Professor Narasimhan was awarded the Spirit of Abdus Salam 2020 prize. That is the only one of the distinctions, that is one of the only distinctions he was awarded. He was one of the best mathematicians from a developing country, and his results are both profound and universal. He played a fundamental role in the development of mathematics in India, and during his stay at the mathematics section at ICTP, he continued to enhance it as a first-rate center of mathematics. His mathematics and teachings had a profound influence in mathematics. Rest in peace. The next message is from Rajendra Bhatia of Ashoka University. I first met Professor M S Narasimhan over 40 years ago. I was then a PhD student and he a renowned senior mathematician. He had a formidable reputation for being aloof and very supercilious. One very distinguished senior had summarized it thus, in quotes, Narasimhan one day is very friendly with me and the next day looks at me as if saying he is sorry he was friendly yesterday. I was therefore very pleasantly surprised that when I came to TIFR in 1979, he was very kind, courteous, and friendly. Of course, he had a stern demeanor, and no one could ignore that. I found that he did choose people with whom he would be friendly, but not the days on which he would do so. As others have said, he was a very versatile mathematician who knew many diverse areas. I had a direct experience of this. On 3 occasions, he made very incisive comments on my work that helped me a lot. On several others, when trying to make conversation, I mentioned something that I was doing, but which I thought was remote from his interests. And I was surprised to find how much he knew about it. While he laid down very high standards for himself and his students and associates, he was reconciled to the fact that others may not have the same standards or the same opportunities. In committees, he will push for the best person or the best proposal and leave it at that. I was often amused and impressed to see him change wavelengths when talking to different people. In some sense, all major enterprises with which Narasimhan was associated ultimately reached lesser heights than he would have liked. He must have been disappointed, but took it in his stride. I did not get to see him for the last 5 years and do not know how he took the collapse of so many things to whose construction he gave so much in his prime. The next message is from Letitia Brambila Paz. Professor Narasimhan's contribution in mathematics goes beyond solving a problem or contributing to a topic or an area. One can see the application of his results in different problems and theories in algebraic geometry, differential geometry, representations, mathematical physics, etc. I met Professor M S Narasimhan about 35 years ago in Liverpool at one of the congresses that Professor Peter Newstead used to organize. There, he invited me to do a postdoc at TIFR of Bombay at that time. I thank him that with long discussions, he has shown me the beautiful way they do mathematics in India, and also for opening me the door to the Indian math community. During these 35 years, we met many times in India, twice in Mexico, and in different conferences in Europe, where he always had new research to talk about. Also in ICTP, Trieste, Italy, where together with Professor Alberto Warkowski, they supported many young Mexicans and Latin American people to pursue a successful career in mathematics. I thank him very much for all the beautiful mathematics he did and the unconditional support he had for a girl that came from Mexico. The next message is from Joseph Samuel from the Raman Research Institute in Bangalore. It is with deep sorrow that I learned of the demise of Professor Narasimhan. I extend my condolences to Shobhana and Shakuntala Narasimhan. He was a real inspiration to all who came in contact with him. I first met Professor Narasimhan in a summer school on differential geometry organized by TIFR at Manasa Gangotri, Mysore University in 1980. I learned how simply, cleanly, and abstractly the masters thought about connections, something which the physics community had yet to learn. On the occasion of Harish Chandra's death in 1983, Professor Narasimhan was asked to speak about the man and his work. The opening lines of his talk were, "Let G be a semi-simple Lie group." That was quite typical of him. The important thing was the mathematics. As he said informally after the lecture, what did the man do? That's the important thing. On the other hand, when the occasion called for it, he could also be a genial and attentive host, making sure that his guests were suitably provided for, beaming with pleasure when the party was humming along. Professor Narasimhan was very interested in theoretical physics, especially those parts of the subject that had overlap with differential geometry. I greatly cherished the interactions I had with him on these subjects. In those discussions, he would often say, in quotes, "We need examples." These simple examples were the base on which he would build more abstract conjectures, some of which rose to dizzying heights of abstraction. I will close by stating one of those conjectures which emerged from these discussions in the context of the universal U1 bundle over CPN. There are no Lagrangian embeddings in complex projective space with trivial holonomy. And last but not the least, we have a message from Sharon Berry. She writes, "I am most honored to have been invited to be with you today to remember Professor Narasimhan and give thanks for his life and the infinitely rich heritage he has bequeathed us. I am deeply saddened by Narasimhan's passing just 2 days after speaking to him briefly. My most sincere condolences go to his wife Shakuntala, his daughter Shobhana, his son Mohan, and his close friends and collaborators at this tragic time of loss and grief. I hope you will all be able to find some comfort in the knowledge of his immeasurable accomplishments and universal contributions." Having been involved with the maths activities at ICTP for quite a few years before Narasimhan took on the leadership of the mathematics section in late 1992, I had frequently come across his name through his predecessor, Jim Els, who fondly referred to him as MS, and thus understood that he was a prominent figure in the mathematics world. So, while for most of 1992, we were waiting for him to take up residence as the new head of section, I was quite anxious as to whether I would be able to live up to his expectations. As it turned out, we had a very fruitful and intense collaboration spanning more than a decade. Contrary to my initial concerns, I found working with him extremely smooth and straightforward, given the methodical and thorough manner in which he dealt with everything coming his way. His conscientiousness and industry were contagious, and for me, those intense years were to be among the most gratifying of my working life. It was as if whatever he touched turned to gold, such as the applications for European funding to support the participation of young European mathematicians in our various activities, always successful. He was exemplary. Not for nothing was he assigned additional responsibilities beyond the scope of the mathematics section, such as the chairmanship of ICTP's program and library committees, which he undertook with equal dedication. On top of these numerous ICTP activities, he had brought with him other roles, such as his serving on the International Mathematical Union's Commission on Development and Exchanges and his editorship of the International Journal of Mathematics. His slight fame certainly belied the mammoth strength within, a strength which clearly emanated to those like myself who had the privilege of interacting closely with him. Yeah, next slide. Next slide, Samira. Yeah. Despite or perhaps because of his very discreet, private and quiet nature, we communicated and interacted extremely effectively and had a few laughs. We shared and celebrated his joys and successes, like when he was nominated Fellow of the Royal Society and when he was awarded the King Faisal Prize, his 70th birthday. When he was particularly pleased with the outcome of something, he would invite me for a celebratory glass of Prosecco in the bar at the end of our corridor. It was a rare privilege indeed to have worked at his side for so many years. Thank you, Narasimhan. I, for one, greatly missed his example, leadership and stoicism after his retirement from ICTP, as I am sure you will all be missing him now. So that brings us to the end of this set of messages. Over to you, Vedasta.
Also,
thank you, Professor Raghavan. There's one more message that Professor Gadadhar Mishra will share.
Yeah, there is. This was a message I had added, but somehow isn't there. So I'll just share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you see the screen?
Should be coming up.
Yeah, it's there.
Gadadhar, would you like to just go ahead and read it out, perhaps?
Yeah, okay.
That might help, yeah.
Right, so I'll do that. Just give me 1 second, yeah. Yeah, so this is a message from Professor Ramesh from the Fourier Institute at Grenoble. And he says, I had the chance of meeting Professor M S Narasimhan on numerous occasions since the 1980s, and especially during 1 month visit at the Tata Institute, Mumbai, during the summer of 1989. At the time, we were both under the shock of the tragical death of Jean-Louis Baudet, who had been the director of studies at the Maths Department of École Normale Supérieure when I was a student, and whom M S Narasimhan knew very well. Although my original focus was complex analysis, I started being gradually more and more involved in algebraic geometry, in particular in the study of vector bundles and vanishing theorems. The prominent contribution of Indian mathematicians to this domain certainly played an important role in this conversion. The work of M S Narasimhan has been especially influential there. The harder Narasimhan filtration and the Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem for stable vector bundle on curves being now part of the tools that all of us constantly manipulate. I have been also very lucky to host Professor Indranil Biswas, a former PhD student and collaborator of M S Narasimhan, as a postdoctoral visitor in Grenoble during the academic year 1995-1996. This created a rich occasion to discuss the joint results he had obtained with M S Narasimhan on Hutch classes of moduli spaces of parabolic bundles over general curves. Professor M S Narasimhan leaves us a considerable mathematical legacy. That's the message from Professor Ramesh, and that brings us to the end of the text messages.
Thank you, Professor Gadadhar Mishra. We have 3 more videos and we would like to share with everyone. The first video is from Fernando Quivedo.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank the members of the Department of Mathematics of the Indian Institute of Science to invite me to participate in this event. I was actually very sad that 2 weeks ago when I received this message from Ramadas telling me about our good friend Narasimhan passing away. I think it's a big loss for the whole mathematics community, and in particular for what I am concerned for the community of ICTP scientists, for which he was very much involved and very much supportive. So I'd like to again to the family of Narasimhan for such an opportunity to meet him the first time when I became the director of ICTP in 2009. So I asked him to continue being part of what is called the Scientific Council of ICTP. He was one of the 2 mathematicians who were in the council to advise the director towards the whole programs of ICTP and assess whatever results we had. I have to say that I knew he was such a famous mathematician with a great trajectory, but I was surprised to learn how such a nice person he was, how humble and kind he was. And he was always committed to support ICTP and his mission. And I have very great memories of him since he, every year when he was coming to ICTP for the regular meetings of the Scientific Council, even in the last few years when his health was not very good, he was still knew he was the head of the mathematics section for me. He hosted me in one of my visits to Bangalore, and we had dinner together with Shobana and so on. And he was always trying to do something to help ICTP, to helping me in have the correct contacts or approach the right people in India to get more collaboration between India and ICTP, etc. And he did that until the end of my my directorship at ICTP. So I can only say good things about Narasimhan, and will always be thankful for all what he did in mathematics, but also his support to ICTP, which is what concerned me the most. And well, especially I will be always very thankful for him to all the help that he provided me and for his friendship. Thank you very much.
The next video is by Oscar Garcia Prada.
I want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity of saying a few words in tribute to Narasimhan. I met Narasimhan just after having finished my PhD over 30 years ago now. And over the years, our friendship, both mathematically and personally, grew. And as everyone knows, Narasimhan was not only a great mathematician and a facilitator of the development of mathematics in the world, but he was also a fantastic human being. He was a great supporter of collaboration, mathematical collaboration between India and Europe in particular, and over the years we discussed possibilities schemes to develop this. And this culminated in the Indo-European project on moduli. This was and Narasimhan played a crucial role in setting this network with his advice and his knowledge. I had the privilege of enjoying the warmth, the friendship, and the generosity of Narasimhan in many visits to India and his many visits to Madrid. We were very lucky that he came to Madrid several times. And I also enjoyed the generosity and hospitality of his family, his wife Sakuntala, his daughter Shobana, and his son I didn't have the opportunity to meet, but to all of them I send them my deepest condolences and my gratitude and my friendship. And I will treasure innumerable moments that we spend, very often over a glass of red wine, and many times in company of our common friend and collaborator S. Ramanan, to whom I also want to send my condolences, to him and to all his former students and colleagues. I will miss Narasimhan very much.
The next video is by M S Raghunathan.
M S Narasimhan was a towering figure in contemporary mathematics. He was a versatile mathematician with deep and beautiful contributions to diverse areas of mathematics. Mathematical analysis, differential geometry, algebraic geometry, representation theory of Lie groups, and mathematical physics. Such a combination of breadth and depth is indeed rare. His early interest was in mathematical analysis. In collaboration with the Japanese mathematician Kotake, who was a fellow postdoc of his in Paris during 1957-60, he proved some beautiful results about elliptic partial differential equations. Partial differential equations is, of course, an old subject, but the Kotake Narasimhan paper is among the pioneering works with a modern approach. On his return to India in 1960, he embarked on the study of differential geometry. Soon, Ramanan and he proved a strikingly beautiful theorem on connections. A connection is a notion that enables one to extend the concepts of calculus to the vast world of all geometric objects. In mathematical physics, the so-called Chern-Simons invariant is in fact dependent on it for its definition. Even as he was working on universal connection, he started a collaboration with C.S. Seshadri. The starting point was in differential geometry, but the culmination was the now famous Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem, which related the differential geometric notion of unitary vector bundles with the algebrogeometric concept of stable bundles on a compact Riemann surface. This was a path-breaking result in the study of moduli of vector bundles, and Narasimhan was to engage himself in pursuing that study ever after. Much of it in the framework of algebraic geometry and in collaboration with S. Ramanan. Around 1970, he strayed away from algebraic geometry to a totally different field, representation theory of Lie groups, and within a few months of entering the field, he solved, in collaboration with Okamoto, a problem with which many experts were struggling. The problem was one of finding concrete realizations of the so-called discrete series of representations introduced by Harishchandra. He went on to formulate a generalization of his theorem, which a brilliant student of his, R. Parthasarathy, proved. That became Parthasarathy's thesis. After the foray into representation theory, he was back in algebraic geometry and proved a great theorem in collaboration with the German mathematician Günther Harder. They introduced a mathematical object which is now known as the Hardy-Narasimhan filtration. Their work has an interface with what is called arithmetical geometry, which is part of number theory, and its influence on that area seems to be growing day by day. While he was engaged most of the time with algebraic geometry, he was at the same time looking at questions in other fields, in particular mathematical physics. Again, his contributions here have proved important. In particular, his work on gauge theory and on the Ferlinde formula. I hope that what I have said gives you some idea of the grandeur of his mathematics and how influential his work has been on the very evolution of mathematics in the last 60 years and more. It's a matter of great pride for me that I was a student and enjoyed a close relationship for over 60 years. Research activities apart, he was also involved in science administration, and in that too he excelled. Those skills supplemented his work as an academic in building the School of Mathematics at TIFR from the fledgling it was into a major international center for mathematics. Under his leadership, mathematics at the International Center for Theoretical Physics made big strides. Many young people from the developing countries benefited immensely from mathematical contact with him as visitors at ICTP. Under his chairmanship, the National Board for Higher Mathematics took many fruitful initiatives for the development of mathematics in this country. His passing away is a great loss to mathematics, to the country, and of course to many of us who were close to him.
May we now invite Professor Gadadhar Mishra to present his remarks.
I first met Professor Narasimhan when he was invited to give a series of lectures on the new proof of the Narasimhan-Seshadri theorem by Donaldson. His proof made critical use of earlier work of Uhlenbeck. Although I did not have any expertise in the topic of the lecture, it was clear to me we were listening to an exposition of mathematics of the highest quality. A number of years passed and I had no other occasion to meet him. When he decided to relocate to Bangalore and, as is to be expected, organize a series of seminars on Kehler matrix and related topics, I couldn't resist the temptation of joining Pati, Jisnu and others from ISI to come and listen to some of these lectures. After I moved to IISc, I met Professor Narasimhan quite often. As one of my friends, Cherian Bhargis, said to me recently, my enduring image of him will be of him standing outside the lecture hall where we had coffee and talk about the lecture, anticipate what might be coming, what might be in store. I, for one, will certainly miss him when I go to a lecture at the department and not find him having coffee with all of us. We started meeting over lunch with other friends, and often he would invite us to his home and very generously let us partake of his very elaborate collection of wine from all over the world. On one occasion, it looked like there will be just the two of us going to lunch. I was nervous like never before. I considered having lunch exclusively with Professor Narasimhan as a privilege. Although I must quickly add that over the years I have learned that there was no reason for me to be nervous at all. My colleagues and I have benefited immensely from his lectures over the past years. For instance, in an informal seminar series started in 2015, Professor Narasimhan lectured for about 2 weeks discussing the Kempf's theorem. The seminar series continued in 2006, covering topics such as Kehler-Einstein matrix on Fano manifolds, extremal matrix, etc. Apart from this, over the past years, he has lectured extensively on diverse topics such as multiplier representations and co-cycles, flat unitary connections on vector bundles, linear spaces, to name just a few. These have been informal lectures typically to answer a question that we would ask him. We have talked about his doing mathematics from the top, but it is amazing to see that someone like him would take the trouble of writing down the most intricate details of an obscure proof. Also, he is one of those mathematicians who is comfortable talking to you in the style of Schwarz or Grothendieck with equal ease. Several young researchers have come to visit him just to talk to him, take advantage of the mathematics that he so generously shares with anyone. He was also the host to several mathematicians from African countries. It is because of him that IISc was a member of the very substantial ERCS grant providing for 2 conferences in March 2017 and December 2017. Also, many mathematicians have visited and lectured in our department with support from this grant. I was very happy to have been involved in the organization of the 80th birthday conference for Professor Narasimhan, first at ICMAT and then in our department. The poster that announced the school and workshop on geometry and physics of moduli spaces that took place in the mathematics department during March 20 to 31st of 2017. It was a 2-week-long workshop with 3 or 4 lectures every day, and you can bet Professor Narasimhan was in each one of those lectures. The other poster is for the meeting that was held, a follow-up meeting that was held at the Indian National Science Academy at the end of 2017, and here is a photograph of the three of the participants of that meeting. Here is a list, certainly not exhaustive, but activities in which Professor Narasimhan played a very, very significant role. Because of the pandemic, even when I was in Bangalore briefly, we were not able to meet, but Ramurthy, Sitaram and I had a long Zoom meeting with him. He promised that as soon as things get a little better, we will meet for lunch. That is not going to happen now, leaving me no opportunity to say so many things that remain unsaid.
Thank you, Professor Gadadhar Mishra. That brings us to the end of this meeting. On behalf of Professor Govindan Rangarajan, Director, Indian Institute of Science, Professor Thangavelu, Chair of the Department of Mathematics, IISc, Professor Gadadhar Mishra, Professor Kaushal Verma, and the entire Department of Mathematics, IISc, I would like to thank all the contributors who sent their messages for this memorial meeting and enabled the rest of us to share their experiences. Professor T. Ramdas for helping with the preparation of this meeting, the participants for taking time out to join us for this event, the team from the Office of Communications IISc, and most importantly, Shobhana Narasimhan for being here with us today and sharing her thoughts. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah, life is not going to be the same again.
Yeah.